Folks, it is a calendar year since 1974, which of course means we have a Stephen King book to talk about. You Like It Darker has just come out. I'm sure many of you have already had the time to read it. And this is a brand new short story collection from King. He likes to do these every now and then, just release these collections that have a bunch of his shorter fiction that have been published in the past few years, usually in like magazines, stuff no one actually reads. And then he'll throw in a few new ones for good measure. Now, I should start this with a disclaimer that while I have read dozens of King's novels and am a pretty massive fan, I have not actually dipped my toes much into his short fiction. Aside from a few selected stuff from Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, I have not read a ton of his short stories. And I'm saying that because, as I go through this collection, it's possible that some of these stories people might see are very derivative of some of his older stuff. Maybe they don't live up to the quality of those, but I don't really have a frame of reference. I'm sort of just speaking as a Stephen King fan who has barely read any of his shorter stuff. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we get into it. And I decided the best way to talk about it is just go story by story as they appear in the collection. The first one is called Two Talented Bastards, and it was quite the strong start. It follows a man whose father was a famous writer and has now passed away of old age. We get it, King, you're getting old. But his dad leaves behind one last story for his son to read, which reveals the secrets of how he became so successful and where all of his ideas came from. It definitely went in a very cool direction that I wasn't expecting, and I just found the way King did the characterization here, the way he revealed stuff, was very engaging, and I was super hooked on this all the way through. But stories like this are why I don't often gravitate towards shorter fiction. Because while I was greatly enjoying it, it got to a point where they set up something new, and it seems like this big turning point for the story. Almost like everything before it was a prologue, and we're like, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. And then it just stops, because it's a short story. Like, it was a great idea, I wanted more, but because I didn't get more, I feel a bit unsatisfied with this one. Still a good start, but I do wish it were longer. Next up is The Fifth Step, which is a very short one about two men sitting on a park bench talking about alcoholism. And it's a nice, engaging conversation. Of course, King is very good at just making characters feel instantly believable. And it's got a nice little surprise. So yeah, while there was not much to this one at all, I did enjoy it. As well as Willie the Weirdo, which is another very short one about this kid who's a bit of a weirdo, And this one was definitely a bit creepier. It's probably going to leave a bit more of an impression on me. But again, these ones that are so short really feel more like they're just like a creepy little idea King had that he just wanted to get down rather than, tell a full narrative. And I think that's fine. It's not really the type of stuff I usually go for. I do prefer longer stuff in general. But, I think they're cute and nothing wrong with that. We see next up we move into one of the longer ones, Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. So it follows Danny Coughlin, who has a bad dream. A dream about a woman getting murdered, and sure enough, it has happened in real life. Now, right off the bat, I love premises like this. Like, seriously, psychic dreams, murder, you get me instantly hooked. This is also the premise of the webcomic I'm currently writing. I'll just plug it here. The second last chapter is out now, and hopefully I'll get the final one out in June. You can check it out. The difference here, though, is that in my story, the characters decide that they probably shouldn't go to the cops with it, while here Danny Coughlin does, and might be a bit of a mistake, as we have one detective who is absolutely convinced that Danny is lying and he is the one who murdered this woman. To me, this whole story felt like a Bill Hodges book if Bill Hodges was absolutely off his rocker insane. And I really love the supernatural element, how it didn't really overshadow anything else, which is unfortunately what I thought sort of happened to the Bill Hodges trilogy at the end. I feel like if the supernatural direction that series took was more like this, I would have been much more into it. But what I loved most about Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream is that despite being quite short, it was still able to tell a complete and satisfying narrative with full character arcs, lots of twists and turns, just everything I love about Stephen King's crime thriller stuff in a bite-sized package. Now, as is the case with most King stuff, we're probably going to be seeing some adaptations of stuff in You Like It Darker, and this is one that I think would work the absolute best as a movie. And I'm no movie producer, but I think I got got a good plan here. So one of King's sons, Joe Hill, wrote The Black Phone, a short story which got turned into a great movie by Scott Derrickson. This is also a story about psychic dreams and killers, and it's a world that Derrickson has gone on to do more with in the recent VHS movie, and they're also making a sequel. I think that Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream fits so well into that universe that, like, they could just make this a movie set in the Black Phone universe. It might just be wishful thinking on my part, but those were the vibes I got from this one, and yeah, I really loved it. Fortunately, though, we get a bit of a dip in quality as we move into Finn, which is the story of an interesting guy who gets mistakenly kidnapped. And I honestly just found this one to be very boring and forgettable. Its ending was also quite a bit unsatisfying, even like he was going for this thought-provoking thing, and it kinda was, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm never going to think about this one again. And then we move into On Slide in Road, which I did think was a bit better, definitely more interesting. It's about this family who, you know, takes like a detour down this sketchy looking road and some stuff happens. I did think this had like a really fun twist involving the grandpa and things that he does. But overall, I was not really engaging with this one as much as some of the other stories. So yeah, I'll probably forget about this one as well. Red Screen, another very short one, but one I think brings us back to the more engaging stuff, and it's sort of like an invasion of the body snatchers type thing going on, a bit of paranoia, and yeah, I thought it was short and sweet. It had a creepy little idea, it capitalized on said idea, and yeah, nothing to complain about here. Next up is The Turbulence Expert, which is probably the most well-known story in this collection, you know, that had been previously released because it was part of a collection of a bunch of flight and flying related horror stories, and it's about this man, a turbulence expert, who goes onto planes that are about to suffer, you know, heavy turbulence, and he, you know, works his magic. And this was cool. It felt very like Stephen King, very Dark Tower, how just there was all this like mysterious stuff going on behind the scenes of the world that we know. Didn't really scare me, though I could definitely see people who are, you know, have a fear of flying, you know, getting a bit uncomfortable with some of the stuff happening here. It was more interesting than anything, you know, not one of my favorites from the collection, but I did enjoy it. Now, Laurie is about a man whose wife dies, and his sister gets him a little puppy, Laurie, to keep him company. And this was a cute story. I liked seeing this grumpy old man, you know, warm up to this little puppy and eventually grow to love it. But the whole time I was thinking, alright, what's the twist? What are you doing here, Steven? I know this ain't no feel-good man's best friend story. What is this here? And yeah, I won't say anything other than, yeah, something does happen, and it is probably the most suspenseful thing in this entire collection, which, you know, in turn led this to be a very memorable experience, and one that, God, Florida sucks. How do you people live there, man? And keeping with the theme of Florida, next up is Rattlesnakes. However, Rattlesnakes is a bit of a unique case in this book, as it is actually a sequel to the 1981 novel Cujo. Kind of like an out-of-nowhere thing that sort of happened, but alright. And I hadn't actually read Cujo when I started You Like It Darker, so I went ahead and read it before I read Rattlesnakes. So we're going to take a bit of a detour to quickly talk about this bad boy. This bad boy. Cujo is, of course, one of King's earlier novels and is therefore considered a classic, especially with the movie that came out. It really cemented itself in pop culture, and I think has even grown beyond its actual story, as it is very common to just hear people reference Cujo whenever they're talking about, you know, a bad dog. I literally grew up with this. One of my aunts had like this nasty little dog that they nicknamed Cujo because he would bite all the children, including me. But what's the story about here? So it follows a number of families in Castle Rock during the time that a giant Saint Bernard named Cujo contracts rabies and goes on a killing spree. Now, like a lot of early King novels, this excels in several areas. I think Cujo himself is a very menacing threat. He really sells the idea of just this giant 200-pound Saint Bernard. You fully believe that he can do all of the things that he is getting up to. Not only is it scary, but it's also quite sad, as we actually get some chapters from Cujo's point of view, and we see that, you know, deep down, he is a good dog. He just wants to do right by his masters. But he's got a bad feeling inside of his head, and it keeps growing, and it's kind of rough to read about. Yeah, there's a lot of great suspenseful stuff here, some great character writing as always, but I do have a lot of problems with this book, actually. The biggest one probably being, this should have been a novella. There is nothing in this book that justifies it being almost 400 pages. It is a very simple idea, and King definitely capitalizes on that idea, but there is just a lot of unnecessary stuff in this book that I think dragged it out and bogged it down. In fact, I think Stephen King's original pitch for Cujo in the late 70s might have looked like something like this. Cereal! Yes, it's no secret King was doing copious amounts of drugs at the time that he wrote Cujo, to the point where he has admitted in the past that he barely remembers even writing it. Which is insane. And you can definitely feel that, he probably wasn't on the top of his game while writing this, because it is very messy. It's jumping around a lot between its multiple characters. One character is going on about his cereal company, and there's so much cereal talk in here, man. Absolutely none of it needed to be here. There was enough character drama to make this an engaging character without his cereal business. And of course, the most famous set piece from Cujo that pretty much everyone knows is when a mother and her son are trapped in a broken down car and Cujo is just outside waiting to pounce. And I knew the idea of that scene. I figured it would show up. I did not expect it to be the entire second half of the book. Like I said, Cujo's great. There's some great suspenseful stuff with him, some great kills, but so much of it is just the mom waiting for Cujo to do something, Cujo waiting for the mom to do something, and it just goes on and on and on. I'm glad I read this book, and I definitely see value in reading it if you are a Stephen King fan. I particularly like the ending, which I did not really expect to go the direction it did, and it was kind of nuts. But overall, feeling pretty on this one. Definitely not one of the better King books that I have read. Now this brings us into Rattlesnakes, and I don't want to give away anything that happens at the end of Cujo, but all I will say is that a character who survived Cujo's rampage is now an old man, as we're set in the modern day, and he heads to Florida to chill out for a bit. Things get a little odd though, as he meets a woman who pushes around an empty stroller, and seems to act like her twins who died years ago are still there. Yes, this is a ghost story, and it is a rather effective and creepy one at that. It's kind of like Dr. Sleep, where it is a sequel to one of King's older books, but the story itself is not really related. I think what King wanted here was a character who had, specific things that happened to him in the past, and I think the easiest way to do that was to just go through his extensive bibliography and find a character who was already like that. And I do think expanding this character more made for a really interesting story. I did really enjoy seeing, the aftermath of Cujo get a bit more fleshed out. And Cujo did have some light supernatural elements, and I was really interested in seeing, more of that stuff get explored here. So did I like Rattlesnakes more than Cujo? I did. Yeah. You absolutely have to read Cujo first, or else, the whole thing will get spoiled, and there are some pretty big spoilers. But yeah, this just made me more glad I read Cujo, and I was quite happy with it. There were also a lot of references to Doomakey, which I have not read. They just say the name a lot, so I recognized it. So if you are a fan of that book, this is also one to definitely check out. Next up is Dreamers, and this is about a war vet who was recruited by a mad scientist to be his assistant as he runs some experiments, as he believes that people have the power in their dreams to unlock eternity. And as always is the case with these types of stories, the question is not always can you, it's should you? And no, they should not. This is a cosmic horror story, and I found it to be absolutely the most terrifying of the bunch. Engaging stuff, very terrifying imagery. It left me with this empty feeling inside. Absolutely love this one. And the final story here is The Answer Man, which starts, I think, in the 1930s. It's about a man who meets someone who claims to know the future, or rather, he can answer any question our main character might have about anything. Ever. But only for a limited amount of time and for a small fee. So he asks some questions that anyone might have, but doesn't really think much of it because, this guy is likely insane. However, as the years pass, he begins to realize the Answer Man, he might have had a point. And then we follow basically the rest of this man's life and his multiple encounters with the Answer Man as he is able to ask him a few more questions each time. And we sort of see how, this paranoia grips him about, if he answered the right questions. If he asked other ones, would he have been able to prevent other things from happening? And it is a very bittersweet story, man. There's a lot of good that happens, but also a lot of bad. Which I guess is normal if you're following someone's whole life. But yeah, some parts were particularly gut-wrenching, and yeah, there's another one I really, really enjoyed. I even have some theories about, like, what the Answer Man might be, so if you're a fan of, like, the whole King multiverse stuff, this is definitely one to check out. And with that, that's You Like It Darker, and I gotta say, man, yeah, I do. Though I don't actually know if this was the best title for the book. Because sure, some of these stories are definitely darker than others. But I don't really know if they all fit into that category. And there were definitely some stories that were weaker than others. But the good absolutely outweighed the bad here. I thoroughly enjoyed most of these stories. And as my first, full, complete Stephen King short story collection, I am feeling very enthusiastic here. I definitely have to start seeking out his other short fiction. And I'm giving this collection as a whole 4 stars. If you're a big King fan, you're probably already making your way through it, but if you aren't, I still think that this is definitely worth checking out if you're just looking for some bite-sized creepy stories. And those who have read more of his short stories will definitely have to let me know what to read next. Obviously, Night Shift is his most famous, and I have that one. I have Skeleton Crew, I have Just After Sunset. Yeah, I know there's a bunch more. Let me know your favorite, and leave your thoughts on anything King-related in the comments down below. Now, I also have 11/22/63 to talk about. However, looking at the time now, there's no way I can fit a review for this chonker in this one. But it will happen at some point. I promise. But I won't leave you hanging. This is absolutely one of the best books he's ever written. Go read this one too. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time for, I think, another haul video, because I've accumulated many goods since last time. So, yeah.